Okay. It says we're live on YouTube for me, so okay, I'm gonna get started. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Saturday Morning Mastermind. I'm host Daniel Sissick. I'm here in cold Las Vegas right now. We're on a little cold sweep. Hopefully by this weekend we'll be back up towards the 70s. But we're in the book. Whatever arises, love that. A Love Revolution that begins with you by Matt Kahn. This is the book, and we are still in chapter 4, and we're on page 84 in the physical book, starting with ending the struggle with discontent. But I'm going to let everybody jump out and give themselves a chance to introduce themselves. And then once we're done, and Catherine, if you don't mind, we'd love to have you read again. We love the way you read and do that for us. I appreciate it. And she is using script.
Good morning, everybody. Samantha Studebaker-Carl here in Indianapolis, Indiana. Looking forward to the discussion.
Lori Emmons here in Denver.
Good morning, it's Catherine Clement. And let me make sure everybody is introduced. Yep. Okay. Wait a minute. No, Jason's on. Jason, come on out.
Hey, good morning. Good morning, everybody. Jason Roberts here, St. Petersburg, Florida. I'll have my video up soon. Thank you, Catherine. Glad to be here.
Thing. I don't know what happened to my picture. I used to have a picture on here. It's not on there. I'll have to figure that out. All right, let me jump over to Scribd and get us started here. So in Scribd, which if you're not familiar with that, that's like a subscription service, sort of like Audible, except you get all kinds of books and magazines and news and whatever you want on there, as well as just Audibles. And there's audiobooks on there too. Monthly subscription, and there's a link on that on our Facebook page. In Scribd, the page numbers are a little different. So it's actually page 96 in Scribd. Ending the struggle with discontent. What if there were no need to be right? What if you were no longer interested in being defensive towards anyone, even when overlooked or wrongly accused? What if, instead of focusing on what you don't have or how unfair life seems to be, you welcome the most incredible possibilities into your life by opening your heart? Perhaps you might discover an open space within each scene of your play where there are opportunities to act as honestly, accepting, and supportive as only love knows how to be. When a brand new way of being is discovered, you are able to see nearly every battle in life as a fight against the feeling of discontent. An obvious sign of discontent is whenever there is a person or circumstance that you blame for any experience. In fact, simply by surrendering the tendency to blame throughout stressful or painful situations, you may experience far less pain and stress along the way. This helps to free you from the pitfalls of suffering instead of perpetuating it through defensive behavior. It's normal to oppose discontent when it can be seen as exactly the way you don't wish to feel. Yet, it is the impulse to deny, avoid, shut down, or lash out against any perceivable cause that prevents you from discovering something more meaningful about it. I'm going to go ahead to the next one because that was a pretty short section. A compulsive pattern of seeking. Underneath the feeling of discontent is a compulsive pattern of seeking. Within this subconscious pattern, there is an impulse to seek out more of something in an attempt to avoid the despair of having less. For example, many people believe they will have less anxiety as long as they seek out more forms of security. It's as if the ego believes if I add more things to my collection, the inevitability of loss won't sting so much. The subconscious pattern of needing to gain something in an attempt to avoid the pain of having less is woven throughout the fabric of society. Perhaps someone who grows frustrated with their career makes a drastic move around the globe to an exotic new country. Shortly after their arrival, the new location doesn't feel as new anymore as the ego looks in alternative directions for additional forms of reinvention. Maybe in the aftermath of losing a loved one, an ego suppresses its pain by purchasing luxury items or tries reliving the past to remember a time when life was happier. Of course, not every decision or purchase suggests an ego at play. It's the beliefs you have about your choices or the hope of what such things will bring you that indicate whether an ego is collecting more as a remedy for having less. Even on a spiritual path, the tendency to seek as a way of trying to resolve the feeling of discontent acts as a telltale sign of how overstimulated a nervous system happens to be. In some instances, ego can use a spiritual path to seek more clarity in hopes of having less confusion. That can even be an aspiration of the highest order to seek more liberation as a way of suffering less often. The ego can also rearrange the polarity of more or less by trying to have fewer thoughts or less fear as a way of creating more peace of mind. While nearly any aspect of life can be a way for the ego to reinvent itself, even adopting a new and improved spiritual persona along the way, the one thing ego cannot use for perpetual reinvention is love. That is because love is a high vibrational energy that directly addresses the source of ego. When love is invited into your life, it unravels the subconscious patterns that keep you so dissatisfied through a constant need to seek. This means you don't have to exhaust yourself by living under a spiritual microscope. Instead, you can make opening your heart your central point of focus and allow love to find a way to resolve it all for you. That's probably pretty good, huh? Or you want me
Yeah,
to keep going?
no, I agree. That's a good spot.
Yeah, that's
All
great.
right.
Thank you.
Going back to where we started with ending the struggle with discontent. I like just right in the beginning, it says, what if there were no need to be right? I think that's something right there. I think inherently, I know I like to, I don't know how to put this. I like to be right, but I don't like to like totally force it on people. I like to try and use engagement and try and get them to my side of what I think is right or how I feel or how I perceive. And I'm, just wondering if, and where it says, what if you were no longer interested in being defensive toward anyone, even when overlooked or wrongly accused? And for me, I tend to take things like that to heart, especially when I feel overlooked or wrongly accused. That really just kind of, I sit there and go over and over and over in my head. And I tend to try and figure out how can I make them see that this is not so, and I think I get in my own way sometimes a little bit more than just saying, okay, whatever, or in doing that, I eventually get to that point where I stop and really think about it. It's like, what do they really have? And why do whatever they say or what they've done really bother me when they really don't have a huge impact on my life, except for the family and close friends that I have? Why let it bother you? Just let it go. That's them, and just move on and get rid of that discord that I have in myself, so that way I can move forward. But I don't know, sometimes I don't know. I don't want to let go of that too.
Yeah, I think it's because, when somebody says something, about us or related to us that we feel is not accurate, we want to defend ourselves, right? And but we don't have to, because that's their opinion and they're the ones that are the only ones that have to think it. We don't have to think it. And I think that's a big that's it's a big deal, because we don't want anybody to think about us in any way other than we think about us, right? So it's hard. I've run into this in, a number of different ways, on social media or on, like out in the world. And when somebody says something that is not accurate, it's a struggle to just allow them to have their own opinion about anything and not be trying to convince them that, our perspective is the only perspective, but particularly if there's like gossip going on, like online for kids. I know that, I'm sure this is a big struggle for teenagers with school and their friends and their people they thought were their friends, and they say something about them, and then even though they know themselves that that is not true, their reaction to it is what kind of fuels the fire of everybody else, giving them even more of a hard time about it, rather than, if we just are like, whatever, that's not true, so I'm not going to worry about it, and but that's a hard thing to do. And when everyone else out there, or many people out there, are saying one thing, and even though in your heart that's not accurate, it's difficult. It's difficult.
Yeah, I was actually just replying right before we got on here, I was replying to someone that had made a comment on a post of mine on Facebook. And it was a post that I put up about, I'm sure everybody on the panel is in the world, except him, maybe, is completely horrified with this whole Ukrainian situation that's happening right now. But what I know as an energetic being, because I know how much my thoughts affect myself and those around me, it does not serve for me to sit here in my home fuming with anger and angst and I'm just here in my house. There's not anything I can do about the situation, really. I don't have the power to change the situation. So, just being completely out of my mind in anger or sadness, it's not that I don't feel it, but I can't let it overwhelm me and have it consume my thoughts and my energy, if that makes any sense. It doesn't serve. It doesn't serve me. It doesn't serve the universe. It doesn't serve anybody around me. And so, as upset and disappointed as I am over the situation, I do have to try to maintain peace, because anger and angst don't resolve war. Peace resolves war. And so if I can't find a way to find peace within myself, how can I expect to find peace in the world? So, someone obviously misunderstood my post, and, I tried to respond as best I could. And I know not everybody can kind of understand that point of view, and I accept that. And, for years and years, I didn't post stuff like that because I didn't want the backlash. Now I don't care about the backlash. Like I know what works in my world, and I happen to be living in my world. So I have to keep my world at peace. That doesn't mean I can't have empathy and sympathy for what's happening, or take actions to stand against them and do what I can that actually does help. But just being completely angry or forcing myself into depression over the situation serves no one.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree with you there, Catherine. That's such a huge thing, is that the complaining and bitching and yelling and screaming does nothing other than make you yourself upset. And what is that one? There's a prayer that something to the effect of give me the strength to accept the things that cannot change. What
The
who knows?
serenity prayer.
Tell me what. Say it, because I don't remember it all.
God, or give me the strength to change the things I can, the wisdom to know the things, or no, the courage to change the things I can, the wisdom to know, no, that's the ending, the wisdom to know the difference. Something like courage to change the things I can. I of course, I do the whole thing until you call on me to say it.
I've got it. I've got it. I found it. It said, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. And, but I think that kind of plays into a little bit of what Catherine was saying here. And also, to me personally, I do not post as much as I used to post on any social media much anymore, because I find myself getting kind of wound up, and I'll admit I kind of wound up on some of these things, and kind of like when Catherine was talking about what's going on in Ukraine, I have my thoughts on it. I have my thoughts of what could be done, how certain things could be done, but my thoughts aren't going to do much of anything because I'm here. I'm not in the positions to make those calls or make those decisions anyway. So rather than let myself, like Catherine said, let myself get wound up or, put out energy that does not help, I'm finding, and a couple times I wanted to start posting something and then I thought better of it. Because then when I took the moment to think better of it, I'm like, well, I didn't think of it this way, but in looking back in retrospect, that's kind of what I'm realizing, that, okay, I'm putting out more negative rather than finding a way to put out something positive and helpful. And at least by not saying anything right now until I can find a way to put that love back out that I think needs to be put out, or if I can offer sound advice or something that might trigger somebody to say, oh, why didn't we ever think of that or try doing that? I think it's better just to keep it within me for now and find ways to handle it within me through, for me, prayer, praying to God and asking, for who I believe at this point. Because of my connection and how I believe and what I believe can help put that energy out that way and leave it in the hands that way in the universe and God to work what needs to be worked out, however it's supposed to play out anyway. Like I said, go ahead.
Sorry,
No, go ahead.
What I learned from Matt himself is that we are to just be still and be at peace and anchor the light and the mental mindset that will put the right energy out there in the world, that I believe it all. As a man thinketh, so is he. And I think the more we think on the bad things, the more energy is going to be given for that. So to sit in peace, stop struggling with the thing we're talking about today, right?
I agree with Matt. In the book, in this chapter or this section that we just read, where he's talking about even on a spiritual path, you run into in fact, especially on a spiritual path, you run into a lot of ego. And I have, having been, off in this weird realm for most of my life, I have seen so many people derail themselves with ego. And and you can, it's like, it's like the doctor that I used to work for, he was a Western medicine doc, and then he got tired of, writing prescriptions and putting Band-Aids on people. So he became a naturopath. And but basically what he did was he went from writing prescriptions for medicines to writing prescriptions for supplements. So he changed paths, but he was still the same, if that makes any sense. Like he chose a different path. And I see that a lot as people embrace spirituality, they go from one dogma to another, basically. And it's like they try to see who can be out spiritualize the next person or something. Like, I don't know, I get constant emails and things popping up because I've been to so many of these spiritual type classes and listened to so many of these gurus and stuff, because I like to have all the different opinions or looks, points of view on things. And they're constantly coming out with a new, I don't know, there's a new dimension you can access. There's a new alien talking to us now. Like, it's constant, never ending, trying to outdo the last one. Unfortunately, and I won't say this for all of them, but for many of them, it is a new sales pitch is what it is. Because once you find that peace, that's all you really need to do, is find that peace and learn how to access that peace at will. And once you know that, that's really all you need to know. Like, once you realize that you're not your body, that you just reside within your body, that's really all you need to know about that. You don't need to study another 50 years on that. These concepts are not something that has to be made improved and better all the time. They're very simple concepts. And there's a lot of salesy stuff going on out there, kind of make people feel like if they pay this amount of money to this person, that's going to boost them up on the spirituality ladder. And it's really not. It's a personal thing. And you can lose a lot of your finances going down that road.
Well, I think that's a good point, Catherine, and I think it leads into the second paragraph in that first section of ending the struggle with discontent. And I think you kind of brought this, what it's saying here, out in a different way. It says, when a brand new way of being is discovered, you're able to see nearly every battle in life as a fight against the feeling of discontent. So I think part of what I got out of that was that everybody gets like to this point of where they think they found this answer or whatever, but then they really realize that, oh, that's not really the answer, when, like you said, it's really pretty simple. Is basically what he's saying here. Just stop trying to be right about it all, and try and quit being so defensive towards everything, and and move in, and go back to that. An obvious sign of discontent is whenever there is a person or circumstance that you blame, whenever there is a person or circumstance that you blame for any experience, and just take that experience as added input. I don't want to necessarily say knowledge, but input for you to use to help hopefully open you up more to being more settled and accepting of whatever's going on, and stop blaming, because when you put that blame on, then that's being negative, and that seems to me that seems to grow faster. hate using that, I'm not using the right analogy, rather than, the love side of it. It seems like, the more negative something is, the faster people glob onto it rather than on the love side and on the positive side. And, and simply by surrounding the tendency to blame throughout stressful or painful, you may experience far less pain and stress along the way by stop being so defensive and taking it so personally, and use it for growth and opening up and opening your heart up more, I think.
Yeah, it seems like that's exactly what he's getting at, saying, what if instead of focusing on what you don't have or how unfair it seems to be, you welcome the most incredible possibilities into your life by opening your heart, and then giving you that extra step to focus on love, so that we leave that defensiveness behind, let go of that. And sometimes, we think of, well, I'm just going to let that go and let that slide. And then we go on about our day, but we don't fill our minds and our focus with love and those possibilities. So I like that he pushes us into that next step.
Well, it is, I mean, Matt says it's normal to oppose discontent when it can be seen as exactly the way you don't wish to feel. And I think that's all where we go first, is when we're in a situation that makes us feel, like squirmy and uncomfortable. We don't like it. And so we kind of oppose it and, get defensive. But sometimes it is the impulse to deny, avoid, shut down, or lash out against any perceivable cause that prevents you from discovering something more meaningful about it. And sometimes we miss seeing what the real meaning of it is. And maybe that's to draw our eyes and draw our heart back over to looking at, oh, well, even though this is this way, I have so much of this, or I am here, and this is just a minuscule thing. Let me focus on the other things that are more important and that I have, and let this diminish itself out to where it doesn't become the main thing I'm focused on. And, after a while, it kind of fades away, and you're focusing on the positive things, or putting out the things that you feel will be helpful or energize, or, help people to realize how unique and wonderful and special they are, and that they are loved, rather than all these negative feelings.
Yeah, like you said, we have this kind of knee-jerk reaction to be defensive, and that almost keeps us and cuts us off, keeps us from being able to lead with love. It kind of like overshadows everything, and maybe even draws us more into the confrontation and more into being defensive before we even get a chance. So it's like that, if we can learn to not be so reactionary and defensive, but to lead with that idea of love and the possibilities, then there's more openness, and there's more ability to grow for both parties. It's almost like, it reminds me of the situations where I've seen something like this happen, where someone is sort of attacked personally, and instead of lashing back out at that attack, the person says something like, "Gosh, you seem to be really upset. What's really going on?" And so they sort of like just completely do like this, jujitsu move, or mindset judo, that where they're leading with love, and and more concerned about the other person than the attack that's being placed on them. And it's almost like in reverse, where they do that, and then later on in the scene, when they're like, when things have sort of been resolved, the other person's just like, hey, I'm really sorry, I kind of came at you that way, and then then you have the ability to be like, yeah, it was a little off-putting, and but it's okay. I'm glad we got to talk about things, so it's almost in reverse. We're kind of backwards to what we're, normally our reaction would be, it seems.
I think you're right. That might be helpful sometimes if you just come from a neutral point to start with and say, hey, you seem a little unnerved or a little, is there something you want to talk about? Something, you need to get out. And because I know for me, sometimes I have a couple of good friends that I go to and I will say, I just need to basically vent to get some stuff out before I lambast some people, because deep down I really don't want to do that. And I think, sometimes I realize there's a more underlying issue. So if I can get that spoken and out and diffused in that sense, then maybe I can go back to that person and kind of come at it from a different point of view and back in love rather than in the hurt or the anger or whatever. But I'm also going to now play devil's advocate and throw something out there and see what you all think. Is there a time to react and to things that you see or that you think are not right and needs to be addressed and brought out and something said about you, and maybe not from you in that moment or anger, but something still might need to be said or brought out against something that you might see or think or feel or clearly you don't think is right.
It depends on, the situation and what we're talking about. If we're talking about like this whole political situation that's happening in the world, and you're upset about it, I know a lot of people are upset about it, but just going out and complaining about it isn't going to do anything. And you have to recognize, well, I can't resolve what's happening, but I can work on the future. And I can go to my local leaders and start encouraging them to do something. I can get involved and start trying to do something rather than just going out there and complaining about it. Now, if we're talking about a situation in a relationship with somebody where you're struggling with them because of something that they're doing or acting or saying or being or whatever, is that then it comes down to interpersonal communication, rather than immediately reacting to whatever it is that they're saying, is trying to find out what's really the cause of their whatever it is, and that takes asking questions, asking the right questions and asking the questions in a non-accusatory manner and doing your best to not immediately react to whatever it is that they say, because we have to recognize that we all struggle to communicate what we really feel. We all struggle with immediately getting into defensive mode. And when we can recognize that, we can communicate better. We can allow that person to say whatever it is they have to say, even if it upsets us, and try and see through the attack, if you will, to the underlying thing that we're actually trying to communicate with each other. Because if we can get to that point, then we can resolve things. If we stay in our defense mode, if we stay in our attack mode, you never can resolve anything because you're always just attacking and defending. rather than actually talking about what's really, really going on or what you're really feeling. And usually that comes down to, what are you expecting from the other person that you're not communicating, or what what are they expecting from you that they're not communicating, or think those are such huge things, particularly in relationships. And we have relationships with everybody, with our partners, our spouses, our children, our coworkers, and all of those situations, is that whenever, and this is my opinion, but whenever there's a conflict, it's because somebody expects something and the other person either A, doesn't realize it, or doesn't agree with it. Because just because you expect something from someone does not mean they are obligated to provide that. So you have to communicate your expectations. You have to communicate with one another what you want out of that particular relationship. And then you have to allow them to choose whether or not they're willing to meet those expectations. And that's a difficult thing to do, is to get past all of the attack and defense aspects of it and all your expectations, and actually communicate those things so that you can resolve those issues. So, I think there's always an appropriate time to talk about things, but you have to really recognize, what's really going on. Am I just in attack mode or defense mode? Am I just upset because I expect something and I'm not getting it? Because odds are good those are the underlying issues. And if we can resolve that and get past those things, then we can actually communicate, what is really going on, and work on those things.
Yeah,
that's great.
I agree with you, Samantha. Oh, sorry, Jason. I agree with you, Samantha. And I do want to throw in, because I fell victim to this myself, and I know that there's a lot of people out there that do as well. When there is abuse involved, you have to step away from that. Like, so many people I myself got trapped in this sort of spiritual, looking at it from the larger perspective, and everything about that person's past that was causing them to do what they were doing. And it sort of put me into this false sense of acceptance of those behaviors, in an effort to like just looking at it more from the spiritual aspect as opposed to the human aspect. But we live here as humans, and when somebody is abusing you emotionally, physically, however, you need to step away from that. You can still love them, you can still look at it from the higher spiritual perspective, but you cannot just allow somebody to abuse you without some consequences there. It doesn't serve you, and it doesn't serve them. If indeed we pre-planned these lives, then if we put ourselves in a situation where we were going to be abused, I think we probably did that to learn that that's not a good thing to accept. And it was a lesson for the person who was doing the abusing to learn that that was not an acceptable way to be. So yes, actions have to be taken, but they don't necessarily have to be taken from a defensive standpoint, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll give an example. There's some folks that I know that work for a company in the area, and there's a particular manager at their company that is very abusive, like verbally abusive to specific people within the company. And we hear all these rumors of everybody complaining and being upset about this particular person. And I see them being upset, I see them being mad, I see them being hurt, and yet they keep working there. They don't do anything about it. And in that kind of a situation, you really have to grow some courage to stand up for yourself and say, look, I don't know why you feel like it's okay for you to talk to me this way, but it's not, you know, and if we can't resolve it, then I'm going to have to leave. But the thing is that we also have to recognize that that choice is difficult because we're afraid of losing our job. And that's a big deal. And so we continue to, you know, keep ourselves in a situation because we don't want to make the hard choice, but there's always a choice. You get to choose, am I going to remain in this abusive situation and just, you know, recognize that it's abusive, but yet the pain of separation is going to be so much greater. So this abuse, I'm settling for it. You know, when we can recognize those choices within ourselves, rather than continuing to fight against it and not do anything to resolve it, you know, because we have the power to resolve it. All we have to do is walk away, you know, and or stand up and say, I'm not going to take this anymore. You can either cut it out or I'm walking away, you know. There, and you can use that in, you know, in any relationship that you're within. And you know, the key really is to recognizing you have a choice and that you can attempt to communicate with the other individual and try and resolve the issue. But if you can't resolve it, then yeah, of course, like Catherine said, you have to get out of it, because that is, well, I mean, you don't have to, but you have to recognize you have a choice to either be in it, remain in it, deal with it, or, you know, and accept it as it is, because you can't change that other person. And then, you know, and or you have to go through the pain of removing yourself from it, because that can be painful too. I mean, and that's, I think, what a lot of times happens with people who are in abusive relationships, is that the pain of getting out of it feels as great as the pain remaining in it, and or maybe even greater. And so that's why people remain stuck. So, you know, I mean, if we can recognize those things, then we can work on those things in ourselves and say, okay, I just need to get the courage. I need to have the courage. I need to make the plan. I need to make the effort. And a lot of times people don't want to make that effort. They just want to complain. And that's how we stay stuck.
Okay, I'm going to throw something out, and because of what you and Catherine were just saying. So I'm going to go out and go on a bigger and more collective, on a worldwide scale. It seems like sometimes the world tends to sometimes move in one direction, and you can see movement. I'll put it like this: movement in love, so to speak. Everybody seems to kind of be going the same direction. Then all of a sudden something pops up, and something over here happens, and something over here happens, and it kind of changes, and parts, or maybe all of the, you know, world, or parts, or maybe in that area, if it's more localized, things tend to pop up and people react, and then you have a little bit more discord out there in the world. How is that? And oh God, I can't say this word. Innocuous. I don't know how to say that word. My mouth is not formed right. To what you were just saying, what you and Catherine were saying, or is there something else out there that kind of somehow shifts or brings things, and it's harder to, because I'm sure we've all sensed it. There have been times for periods of years, it seems like everything was just going fine, and then, you know, pockets here and there. And because the world is so much more connected now, I think we're all connected to it more, rather than, you know, like when I was growing up, you might hear of something going on over somewhere, or this or that, but it didn't really tie into your everyday world. So how does that play into everything that we're talking about here, and how, because I'm only one person. So again, I don't have a lot of control, but I feel I can put something out too. So that's kind of my question. How do you guys see something like that? And how do we help move that direction?
Hey, that's a great point. And, it seems to me like from what you're saying there, I mean, it brings to light, a definite need for all of us to get better at reacting properly, right? Because things are coming at us so quick. It's interesting. I'll be on Twitter, and I'll get, there'll be an update in the news on like mainstream media, and then I'll see all these groups or these people wanting to like come out and be like that, hey, this just happened, and they're all chiming in the same time. So yeah, it happens so fast now, right?
But now, going back to kind of like what I was getting at, now that we are more connected, but at the same time, there seems to be so much discord and disconnect and out there. But yet I also believe that there is some power in alignment with even from the smallest point, because like we talk about, skipping a stone or dropping, throwing a pebble in a pond, and that how the ripples can ripple out. So I believe that there can be some effect caused and things like that. But once again, I see that, there are times where, for lack of a better way, it seems like the whole world's going the same direction and kind of on the same path. And then all of a sudden you get a blow up here and a blow up there. But yet, like you were saying, remove yourself from that, or, but sometimes you can't totally remove, but it's still affecting everything. So how do we work with that overall? Because some things I don't want to totally block out, and I want to put out what I can to put out to help put love out there in that sense. But it's so minuscule too, but yet I'm going back to that idea that it can start with that ripple from right wherever we're at and move out too, though. So that's kind of what I'm trying to look at, and see what everybody thinks about that.
I've been trying to get out for 5 or 6 conversations or outbursts or whatever. It made me realize how very hot this whole topic is today. But one thing that I had realized earlier, and I'm pretty sure I had not thought about it before. The title to this book being Whatever Arises, love that. I've been tackling trying to recognize what and when things arise in me and what that has to do with anything. And just a real, hopefully an example that won't affect anyone. I've been trying to deal with that I have to leave my wonderful apartment where I'm 12 stories up and I can look out and see the horizon and see the mountains and see things. It's so flat here in this valley that most of my life here, the thing that I've had the most difficult with is that it's flat. They call it the Valley of the Sun, and very few people can see the valley part or what contains the valley part, because You just, you're walking along, taking your walk, you're driving along, you're doing whatever you're doing, and you can't see anything, but I've described them before, hills of dirt with cactus on them. And it's so nice to be up here where I can see something that looks like an actual mountain. But I had set on March 1st as the day to move with where I'm moving to. And I kept getting words back that I was moving on the 24th of February. And I finally decided that that was coming from one person and that I needed to tackle that. Now, if I had thought then about what I've just grasped about this study that we're doing, if I had realized that what I needed to look at was what was arising in me, not necessarily the subject or anything else, but just what was arising in me and why was it arising in me, I would have been able to handle it better. I would have been able to handle it differently, and I would have been able to let go of the rumination that I was doing over something that, nobody else really was affected by or cared about. I hope that that's made a little sense and been a little bit helpful.
Yeah, that's a great realization there. I appreciate that.
Definitely. You hit the nail on the head. Like I said last week, it's pretty crazy how much we fight against reality. So we have to learn to just, whatever arises, we have to look at that, and we don't always handle situations the way that we should. And then, when we're studying things like that, then we can look back at a situation and say, oh gosh, I could have handled that a heck of a lot better, and then we have to love what arises from that. We have to make sure that we're loving ourselves for doing the best we could at the time, instead of, judging ourselves or condemning ourselves for the way that we acted at that time. We have to love that we are learning. We're learning every day, every moment, every second of our lives. We're learning how to better interact. Some people are going the opposite direction. You can very rarely diffuse anger. Anger is very difficult to diffuse because it stems from fear, and anger always comes from fear. And fear is driven by our survival mechanism. We are animal. We have animal instincts for survival. And so fear really connects to that deep and primal energy. And so love is very good at calming fear. Not so much anger, because when we're angry, we're just too, our egos are so involved in whatever it is. And I am guilty of this. Like, don't think that just because I get on here and talk about shit like this, that I don't react. I don't say the absolutest, worst, horrible, wrong things that I could ever say to somebody, because I do. Like, I'm as human as anybody else. And but then I have to remember, I'm learning, I'm doing the best I can, and go back and look, why did that cause that reaction in me? Did it trigger my fear? And is that what caused me to lash out like that or whatever? So anger is a survival mechanism too, because it's a higher vibration than despair or depression. Some of the lower, it's anger can be very helpful at times, at least it is for me, because I can get angry and I can get things accomplished that I couldn't accomplish before I got angry about it. So anger can be definitely a good and driving force, but only like short-lived. Then once you can look at the situation and figure out and find a better way to go forward besides being angry, that's usually ideal. And certainly stuffing the anger is not ideal, because then you wind up with health issues, because our bodies respond to these thoughts. That's a key thing. Like our going back to the water studies where they froze the crystals of water and looked at them after speaking words of love or speaking words of anger or fear over the container of water and then freezing it. Like, think about how much water we are, how much water our world is. It's such a carrier of energy, and yet sometimes we can ruminate over things for days or weeks or months or years or decades. Some people ruminate over a wrongdoing that happened to them many years ago, and they just keep that trauma locked within their cells, causing health issues. And you guys know I work with medical ozone, and I work with people that have cancer and different health conditions like that. And it is almost my job. Yes, I'm there to treat them with a remedy that I know helps the human body. But what I'm really there for is to help them heal their soul. Not that their soul is broken, but just the way they're interacting with their soul through their body. Because just speaking to them about things like this, about traumas that have happened to them and helping them resolve around those kinds of issues, the body it automatically starts healing itself. It's really fascinating. And again, you can look for those moments in time where, because some people are not constantly inundated with you know, signals or messages from the other side, for lack of a better word. But I think everybody gets those moments where, you know, it's almost like a deja vu sort of thing, where you just know in that moment that everything is exactly as it's supposed to be. Like, if it was 1 second different, there would have been an entirely different outcome in a situation. And you just know in your heart that everything is exactly as it's supposed to be. And when you can anchor those moments and then go back to that, you know, when you're in a moment of stress or angst, and you can go back to that anchored moment. It's just like when you're learning public speaking or something like that. You know, they teach you, when you step up on that stage, if you're nervous, you go back and you anchor to a point in your life where you had all of the confidence that you needed, and you said all of the right words, and you bring forth that energy, as opposed to wallowing and hanging out in the lower vibrations.
That's a great reminder, Catherine. Thank you.
Well, going back to what you were saying about, you know, the water and the crystals, and how, you know, the studies showing how water looks frozen when, you know, with, you know, hateful or anger words and stuff. And so I went and looked at that study, and that just blew my mind away of how, but it goes back into how powerful our words are. And I also think it goes back into how powerful our words that we say within ourselves and what we put out, depending on how, you know, the in the moment or reacting or stuff, what type of power it has. And if we even before we think, if we could always, but we don't, we just react, take that moment to think, okay, what am I really putting out there? And what type of power does it carry and does it convey? And how is that going to be used? And, the love side produces these beautiful, one of a kind crystals, that are amazing to look at. But on the other side, the hateful, the hurtful, and all that were these very ugly, yellow, dark things. If we can remember to keep that kind of as a part of our mindset when we're speaking out, then maybe that's how that ripple effect I was talking about earlier, where we can have that effect even from our one little ripple can carry out. And I believe that love and all that, like it says, love conquers all. I think that can carry a bigger ripple out than the anger and the hurt and the reactionary things.
We should all print out the pictures of those crystals and hang them at where we sit the most or whatever in our house, where we can remind ourselves, oh yeah, that's what I'm doing to myself and others.
I would encourage anybody to go and I don't remember the guy that did that study and stuff, but to go and actually watch the YouTube videos and look at those and see the power, because and it's a great reminder for myself to remind me of how much power I have for myself and what I say to myself too. And if I can speak to myself more in love, then from out of that, I can hopefully put out more love out there too when I'm reacting and dealing with that too.
Yeah, I think that's such a great thing, is if you can look at those and have that reminder of, what is it that I am wanting more of in my life? What is it I want to create more of in my life? And when you have this that's very black and white, if you will, two completely opposite results of how you can be and what you can create in the world, and you can choose. You get to choose whether you want to create these beautiful things or whether you want to create more unpleasant things. And I was reminded when we were talking in the book Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh. She talks there's some parts in there where he's talking with God, and God is like, I'm not judging you on anything. You're judging yourself based on what you want. All I'm doing is throwing out the questions, going, you said you want to go down the path of peace, and yet you are choosing negativity and upsetness and anger and conflict and all of that. I'm not judging you for that. I'm just trying to help you recognize you're choosing this instead of choosing the path of peace. And that's not a quote, by the way, that is my interpretation of what he said in there. But it really made me think of like, okay, so, I get to choose my path, but I also get to choose whether I stay on that path. I say I want something, and I keep saying I want something, but yet my actions are taking me down the other way. And when we can recognize that, then we can choose again and choose the path that we want, because it's not really, everything is kind of this gray area, right? There's it seems like there's absolute right, absolute wrong, but it all depends on what your goal is. It all depends on what the outcome is that you're working towards, to determine whether it's right or wrong for you in the moment, in the situation, according to what it is that you're trying to create in your life. And those images are perfect, very simplistic example of, we can either create the energy that creates beautiful things, or we can take the path of negativity and create more unpleasant things in our lives.
And Lori put in the chat of who it was that did that water crystal study, and it was Dr. Emoto. And yes, that's once she put that, it's like, yes, that's the doctor that did it. And I'm putting that in the YouTube channel chat to suggest that everybody go look at that, because I think if they go look at that for themselves, they'll kind of get the power of, some of what you just said back into a lot of what we've said even here today.
We're past the top of the hour, guys. So anybody wants to share a final thought before we wrap up today?
I just had just want to jump out real quick for a final thought. I love what you're saying there about choosing the path there, Samantha, and I'm thinking that's so true. And we have it it's in our hands. Our life, our future is all in our hands, and it starts with our choice of focusing our mind on that which we want to bring into existence. And what a better way than to lead with this idea of opening our heart to what arises. And the idea of that popped in my head is, it's easier when we're in groups like this and everyone's focused on this. Even when we're maybe not in the right mindset before the group, and when we get in the group, we start being our mind starts to be won over by the ideas of and the understanding of leading with love and the possibilities. But when we're alone, it's a lot harder sometimes, and we might question, well, why does it feel different now? But again, it goes back to our choice and those helpful mantras that Matt Kahn gave us, and makes me realize that it takes some effort, and that's in our hands as well, and we can make the effort to hold these thoughts in our head even when we're alone. We can cultivate these feelings of gratitude and leading with love and opening our heart to the possibilities, and not being so defensive and not blaming others, but taking on that responsibility, but and when taking on that responsibility, giving ourselves forgiveness and blessing others through our own heart so that we receive that blessing first. And so since we spend so much time with ourselves, by ourselves, I think, recognizing that, these groups we don't always have the group, but we do have the replays here for Mindset Mastery Collective. And you can always pop over to our YouTube channel and then come on live every Saturday morning. We'd love to hear from everybody that's out there listening to this. Thank you so much for all of your thoughts, everyone. It's great to be here.
Yeah, also, go ahead.
Sorry about that. I wanted to give you a nod, Jason, because I really appreciate what you've done for your wallpaper for today, by putting the book title up and the Mastermind Collective up, and just end out by thanking everyone that we get together like this every week, and just to reiterate that I love all of you and appreciate you being here. Thank you.
It's good to see everybody here, and I think the trick, especially for me, is learning to take a second and respond rather than react. So I look forward to seeing you all next Saturday.
Yeah, I agree with what everybody's saying here as we're trying to close out. Yeah, taking that time to just breathe, take a moment, say make that decision on how you want to choose to respond, in love or in discord. And then react from there. And to also remember our Facebook page, you can go join the group there, be a part of the community there. Please like and thumbs up our page and our YouTube replays and everything like that. And if you want to get on here and be one of the panelists, you can always get a hold of one of us and we can help work that out with you. So for this edition of the Saturday Morning Mindset, we are in the book, Whatever Arises, Love That, A Love Revolution That Begins With You by Matt Kahn. Yeah, this is the book. You can also find it on Scribd. And you use that to follow us also. So from Las Vegas, thanks for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you next week on the Saturday Morning Mastermind.